move on. So not only do we have we have the plaintiff side that needs to prove the assault or prove the battery, right, against the defendant. We also have the defendant side who's allowed to defend themselves, right? The defense attorney is going to bring on some defenses if they can possibly meet the elements of the defense, and then they can bring those in as defenses in their answer to the complaint. Okay? All right, so let's look at them. We're just going over 4 defenses. There are more, but your book just talks about 4, so I'm going to stick with these 4. And remember, these are geared towards assault. I see you. Thank you. These are geared towards assault and, why did that, sorry, assault and battery. Okay? So on your charts, if you're making those charts, right below assault, I would put defenses. Right below battery, defenses. So you have to be aware of the defenses too. Okay? So, the following defenses may be used by a defendant who is sued for assault, battery, or is being sued for both. And if our defendant is being sued for both, the defense attorney is going to look for defenses for assault and battery. Okay, we need to defend both. All right, so the first defense is consent. And when a person gives permission, okay, to the act that damages him or her, there is generally no liability, no legal responsibility for the damage done because they gave permission. They gave consent to the act. Let's look at our example. For instance, if Susie consents to being kissed by Brian, right? Brian can then raise the defense of consent, right? If she decides to sue him for battery, and now she's going to say it was an unwanted touch or an unwanted kiss on the cheek. Now she can maybe sue for battery. And if she does sue for battery, and then the defense attorney for Brian is going to use the defense of consent. And then we're going to use Brian's words to explain why this was consented to. Why did Brian have permission to give her this kiss? Okay, that defense may work for Brian. Second defense, self-defense, everyone. A person defending her life, okay, or physical well-being can claim self-defense. In situations of both real and apparent danger, a person may use whatever force, this is the trick here, whatever force is reasonably necessary. Okay, let's stop there. So if somebody is trying to defend themselves, either their life or maybe physically, their physical well-being, if they're going to defend themselves, we always look at the reasonableness, okay? It needs to be kind of the same force that is being brought to that person. So if somebody is, let's say, has somebody comes at your client with a bat, right? What would be reasonable force for your client to defend themselves? Bringing out a gun? Probably not, right? What would be reasonable force? We have to, always look at that. Okay, we can use self-defense, but we're going to look at how reasonable was the defense. Okay, that's very important to remember. So reasonably necessary to prevent harmful contact. It can't be more of an aggravated offense, self-defense, where we're going to take, this to the next level, basically. Has to be equal force. Okay. All right. Defense of others, everyone. Oh, let's look at our example. Sorry. Simon assaults Linda. So we have Simon assaults Linda with a knife. She can claim this defense, self-defense, if Simon sues her for hitting him with a baseball bat. So now your book is telling you that a knife. So Simon comes over. Remember what assault means? It doesn't mean that Simon actually made contact with her with this knife. Assault means that he created some apprehension to make her feel a little bit, threatened. Maybe he had the knife and he's walking towards her. She became apprehended, so that's an assault, right? But she can also, if she decides to defend herself, she's going to go over and grab a baseball bat, which is kind of equal force, right? So baseball bat and a knife would be equal force. The knife facts don't say it was actually used, but it's an equal force to stop him from doing what he might attempt to do to save her life or her physical well-being. She can use this as a self-defense. and this would be an actual defense for her. Okay, so remember, it has to be kind of the same force. All right, any questions about self-defense? I think the most important thing, everybody, reasonably necessary. Reasonable force, not excessive force. Okay? All right, defense of others. A person can act in a reasonable manner, there's that word again, to protect others. So you're not protecting your client is not protecting themselves, but they can use reasonable force to protect someone else, okay, who are in real or apparent danger. Now, once again, the force has to be equal force. If you see somebody harming someone else, you need to use equal force to stop that harm. You're going to use the force that the person would have used if they could have used it. Okay, so here we have Fred who offensively grabs Rafik's wife. Okay, so we have Fred, he grabs the wife, and then what does Rafik do? He hits Fred. Okay, why does he hit Fred? Why is this the defense of others? Well, that's his wife. Okay, Rafik can raise this as a defense if Fred tries to sue him for battery. Okay, so Rafik can only use the same amount of force that his wife would have used if she could have used it. Okay, Rafik can't use anything more excessive. He has to think at that time he can only use what his wife could have possibly done. Okay, nothing more. No excessive force, everybody. Reasonableness is what we're looking for when it comes to defense of others. You can defend others, just make sure it's reasonable and equal force. Okay? So that would be another defense. The last one is defense of your property. Once again, reasonableness. People can use reasonable force in attempting to remove intruders from their homes. Okay? We'll talk about this in the castle doctrine in chapter 13 when we get there. Generally, force that is likely to cause death or great bodily injury should not be used just to protect property. We never, ever advocate excessive force or deadly force when protecting property. Okay? So generally, if it's likely to cause death or great bodily injury, it should not be used to protect property. Okay, that's the castle doctrine. We'll get more into that. But remember, defense of property, you can use reasonable force in attempting to remove those intruders that are entering or from their home. You can use reasonable force. Deadly force is usually not encouraged. It's not a great defense, and it depends on the circumstances. Depends on the facts. But usually we just want you to use force, right? We don't want you to use reasonable force or reasonable defense of your property, and nothing that causes death or great bodily injury. We would consider that excessive, but once again, it depends on the circumstances. It depends on the facts. Okay? For instance, if you catch someone in the act of breaking into your garage, you can use non-deadly force to stop that person without being liable for battery. Okay? Non-deadly force. So, we don't want to use anything more excessive than that. Okay? You can use this to defend your property, but it needs to be reasonable and non-deadly force at all times. Okay? All right, so those are some of the defenses that your client on the defendant's side can bring up for assault and battery. So we have consent,